What would you do if someone told you that you don't belong? A pilot walks up to a black woman sitting in first class on a private jet. He doesn't ask her name. He doesn't check her ticket. He just looks at her and says 3 words. Know your place. He wanted her humiliated. He wanted her gone. But what he didn't know was that this woman wasn't just a passenger. She was the billionaire who owned the entire airline. She owned that plane. She signed his paycheck. And in the next few minutes, his whole career was about to end. Stay until the end. What happens next will shock you. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one I don't want to miss it. Know your place. The words hit Victoria Chambers like a slap across the face. She stood in the narrow aisle of the private jet, her carry-on bag still in her hand, staring at the pilot who had just spoken to her. Captain Raymond Cross blocked her path to the forward cabin. His uniform was crisp. His jaw was tight. His eyes looked at her like she was something that did not belong. I said, move to the back, he repeated. This section is reserved. Victoria felt her heart pound, not from fear, from something much older, something she had felt many times before in many places when people looked at her brown skin and made their judgments. She took a slow breath. What Captain Cross did not know, what nobody on this plane knew, was that Victoria Chambers was not just a passenger. She was the sole owner of Skyward Aviation, the company that owned this very aircraft. She was worth over $4 billion, and in about 30 seconds, this man's entire career was about to end. But first, she wanted to see exactly how far he would go. 48 hours earlier, Victoria had been sitting in her corner office on the 32nd floor of the Skyward Aviation headquarters in Atlanta. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long golden rectangles across her mahogany desk. The view showed the city stretching out beneath her, glass towers catching the light like diamonds scattered across the earth. She had built this company from nothing. 23 years ago, she had been a single mother working 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and answering phones at a small cargo airline during the day. She remembered those nights clearly, the smell of industrial cleaning solution, the ache in her back, the exhaustion that never seemed to lift. But she had saved every penny. She had studied business books borrowed from the library, reading them on her lunch breaks and during the few quiet hours before dawn. She had taken risks that terrified her, betting everything on her belief that she could build something meaningful. Now Skyward Aviation owns 47 aircraft. They served private clients, corporate accounts, and charter services across North America and Europe. Victoria had become one of the wealthiest black women in America. Magazine covers, television interviews, speaking invitations from universities and business conferences around the world. But she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the feeling of being invisible. On her wrist, she wore a thin gold bracelet. It was old and simple, with a small heart-shaped charm that had been worn smooth by years of touching. Her grandmother had given it to her when Victoria was 16 years old, the day before her grandmother passed away from cancer. They had been sitting together in the hospital room, the machines beeping softly, the afternoon light fading through the blinds. Her grandmother's hand had been so thin, so fragile, but her grip was still strong when she pressed the bracelet into Victoria's palm. "Remember who you are," her grandmother had said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not what they tell you that you are, who you are." Victoria touched the bracelet now as she read through the quarterly reports on her computer screen. The numbers were strong. Revenue was up 12%. Customer satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. The board of directors was pleased. Everything looked perfect on paper, but something had been bothering her for months. A feeling she could not shake, a whisper at the edge of her consciousness. She had heard things, small complaints from employees who quickly went silent when she walked into a room. Nervous glances exchanged between staff members. A feeling that something was wrong in the culture of her company, especially in the flight operations division. Victoria had asked questions, she had brought it up in meetings, but everyone assured her that everything was fine, just normal workplace friction, nothing to worry about. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A text from her daughter, Naomi. Mom, are you coming to my art show Friday? You promised. Please don't cancel again. Victoria felt a familiar pang of guilt. She typed back, I'll be there, I promise. Nothing will stop me this time. Naomi was 17 now, smart, talented, fierce. She had inherited her mother's determination and her grandmother's gentle wisdom. But lately, their relationship has been strained. Victoria's long work hours, her constant travel, her phone calls during dinner, it was all taking a toll. Naomi had stopped sharing things with her. Their conversations had become short and functional. The warmth between them was fading, and Victoria did not know how to get it back. She stared at the text for a long moment. Then she set the phone down and went back to her reports. There was a knock on her office door. Come in, Victoria said. Marcus Webb entered. He was her chief operating officer, a tall man in his early 50s with graying temples and a confident stride. He wore expensive suits and spoke with the smooth assurance of someone who had spent decades in corporate boardrooms. Victoria had hired him 8 years ago, promoted him twice, and trusted him completely. He was one of the few executives who had been with her through the hardest years of growth. When the company nearly went bankrupt during the financial crisis, Marcus had worked 18-hour days beside her to save it. She considered him not just a colleague, but a friend. Victoria, Marcus said, settling into the leather chair across from her desk, we need to talk about the Miami route. What about it? We have a VIP charter scheduled for Thursday. Senator Harold Whitfield and his team, high-profile client, lots of media attention. Captain Cross is assigned to fly it. Victoria nodded slowly. Raymond Cross was a senior pilot with 15 years of experience. She had never met him personally. With hundreds of employees, she could not know everyone, but his personnel file showed excellent flight records. No accidents, no safety violations, consistently on time. Is there a problem? She asked. Marcus hesitated. It was a small hesitation, barely noticeable. Most people would have missed it entirely, but Victoria had spent 23 years reading people, and she caught it. No problem, Marcus said, a beat too quickly. Just wanted to confirm the schedule with you, make sure everything's in order for the senator. Victoria studied his face. Marcus was looking at a point somewhere over her shoulder, not meeting her eyes directly. He was shuffling the papers in his hands without purpose. Marcus, she said slowly, have there been any complaints about Captain Cross? Anything I should know about? Nothing serious, Marcus said. He stood up, moving toward the door. Just the usual crew conflicts, personality stuff. You know how it is with pilots, big egos. He's one of our best, though, 15 years without an incident. Victoria let the silence stretch. She had learned that silence often revealed more than questions. People felt compelled to fill empty space with words, and those words often told the truth. But Marcus just smiled and put his hand on the door handle. I should let you get back to work. The Miami flight is all set, nothing to worry about. After he left, Victoria sat very still for a long time. The sunlight had shifted, throwing shadows across her desk. Something about that conversation felt wrong. Marcus had been nervous. He had avoided her eyes. He had changed the subject too quickly. In 23 years of building this company, Victoria had learned to trust her instincts. Her instincts had told her when to expand and when to hold back, when to hire and when to fire, when to take risks and when to wait. Right now, her instincts were telling her that Marcus Webb was hiding something. She picked up her phone and called her executive assistant. Janet, I need you to pull all personnel files and any complaints related to Captain Raymond Cross. Everything from the past 5 years. Any incident reports, any HR documents, anything at all. Of course, Miss Chambers, I'll have it ready by, and Janet, do this quietly, don't tell anyone, especially not Marcus. There was a pause on the line. Janet had worked for Victoria for 12 years. She knew when something was serious. Understood, Miss Chambers, I'll be discreet. Is everything okay? Victoria looked out the window at the city she had conquered. The city that had once made her feel so small. I hope so, she said. I really hope so. The next morning, Victoria arrived at the office before dawn. The building was quiet, the hallways empty. She liked this time of day when she could think without interruption. A thick folder was waiting on her desk. Janet had worked late into the night to compile everything. Victoria made herself a cup of coffee, sat down, and opened the folder. What she found made her stomach turn. There were 6 formal complaints against Captain Raymond Cross over the past 3 years. 3 were from black flight attendants, 2 were from Hispanic crew members, 1 was from an Asian co-pilot. The complaints described the same patterns: rude comments, dismissive treatment, being told they were not qualified, not professional, not the right fit, being excluded from crew briefings, being assigned the worst tasks, being spoken to with contempt while white crew members were treated with respect. Small humiliations that added up to something much larger. Victoria read each complaint carefully, her coffee growing cold beside her. The words blurred together, but the message was clear. Her company had a problem, a serious problem, and someone had been hiding it from her. One complaint stood out from the others. A flight attendant named Grace Thompson had written a detailed report 8 months ago. Grace had worked for Skyward for 5 years. Her performance reviews were excellent. She had received commendations from passengers and supervisors alike. But in her complaint, Grace described an incident that made Victoria's blood run cold. During a flight from New York to Los Angeles, Captain Cross had pulled Grace aside before boarding. He had told her that she would not be serving the first-class cabin that day. "Customers in this section expect a certain kind of service," he had said. "A certain kind of person. You don't fit the image." When Grace asked what he meant, Captain Cross had looked at her with cold eyes and said, "You know exactly what I mean." Grace had filed the complaint immediately after landing. The file showed it had been reviewed by Marcus Webb personally. Victoria turned to Marcus's notes. Her hands were shaking slightly. Investigated, no action required, personality conflict between crew members. Resolved through reassignment, case closed. Grace Thompson had been transferred to a different route. She now worked cargo flights, loading luggage in the middle of the night. Captain Cross had faced no consequences whatsoever. Victoria pushed the folder away and stood up. She walked to the window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. This was happening in her company, under her name, under the name she had worked so hard to build. And Marcus Webb, her trusted friend, her right hand, had been covering it up. She thought about what to do. The logical part of her mind said to fire Captain Cross immediately, to confront Marcus, to bring in lawyers and investigators, to make an announcement and show the world that Skyward Aviation did not tolerate racism. But another part of her hesitated. She had learned something important over the years. When you wanted to understand a problem, you had to see it yourself. Reports and files only told part of the story. They were filtered through other people's perspectives, other people's fears, other people's agendas. If she wanted to know the truth, the real, unfiltered truth, she had to experience it herself. Victoria made a decision. She would take the Thursday flight to Miami, not as the owner of the company, not as a billionaire, not as the woman whose face was on the cover of Forbes magazine. She would go as a passenger, an anonymous black woman traveling alone. She wanted to see exactly what Captain Raymond Cross would do when he did not know who she was. It was a risk. It might be humiliating. It might be painful. But Victoria needed to know the truth with her own eyes. She called Janet. "Book me on the Thursday charter to Miami. Use my personal name only, not my business identity. Just Victoria Chambers. No title, no VIP treatment, no special notes. I want to look like a regular passenger." "Ma'am, are you sure? That's the senator's flight. Very high profile. If something goes wrong, I'm sure." "And Janet, tell no one, not Marcus, not the board, not anyone." There was a long pause. Then Janet said quietly, "I understand, Miss Chambers. I'll take care of it." Victoria hung up and looked out at the city again. The sun was rising now, painting the buildings in shades of gold and pink. Thursday was 2 days away. Whatever happened on that flight would change everything. Wednesday night, Victoria went home to her penthouse apartment on the top floor of a building she had purchased 3 years ago. The apartment was beautiful, marble floors, original artwork, a view of the entire Atlanta skyline. But tonight it felt cold and empty. She found Naomi in her bedroom, working on a painting. The canvas showed a woman standing alone in a field of flowers, her face turned toward a distant storm. "That's beautiful," Victoria said from the doorway. Naomi did not look up. "Thanks, what does it represent?" "I don't know yet. That's the point. You figure it out as you make it." Victoria stepped into the room and sat on the edge of Naomi's bed. The distance between them felt like miles. "About Friday," Victoria began. "You're cancelling." Naomi's voice was flat, unsurprised. "No, I'm not. I'll be there, I promise." Now Naomi did look up. Her eyes were skeptical. "You said that last time, and the time before that." "I know, and I'm sorry I've been..." Victoria searched for the right words. "I've been so focused on the company that I've forgotten what really matters. I've forgotten to be here for you." Naomi set down her paintbrush. For a moment, something soft flickered in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the guarded expression she had worn so often lately. "It's fine, Mom, I'm used to it." Those words hit Victoria harder than any insult could have. "I'm used to it." Her daughter had learned not to expect her mother to show up. "Naomi, I want to do better. I want us to be closer again. I miss talking to you. I miss knowing what's happening in your life." Naomi was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was small. "Do you remember when I was little? When did you used to read to me every night before bed?" "Of course, I remember. You used to do different voices for all the characters. And we would laugh so hard sometimes that we woke up Mrs. Patterson next door." Naomi smiled faintly at the memory. "I miss that. I miss the mom who had time to laugh." Victoria felt tears prickling her eyes. "I miss her too, baby. I think I lost her somewhere along the way, but I'm trying to find her again." She reached out and took Naomi's hand. Her daughter did not pull away. "I love you," Victoria said, "more than any company. More than any success. You are the best thing I ever created." Naomi squeezed her hand. "I love you too, Mom." They sat together in silence for a while, watching the city lights twinkle outside the window. It was not a complete healing. The distance between them had been building for years, and it would take time to bridge it fully. But it was a start. Before Victoria left the room, she touched her grandmother's bracelet. "Grandma gave this to me when I was about your age," she said. "She told me to remember who I am, not what other people tell me I am. I've been thinking about that a lot lately." Naomi looked at the bracelet. "I remember Grandma a little. She smelled like lavender." "She did, and she was the strongest woman I ever knew. She would have loved you so much." Naomi smiled, a real smile this time. "You better show up Friday, Mom. I'm holding you to it." "I'll be there," Victoria promised, "no matter what." Thursday morning arrived with grey clouds hanging low over Atlanta. Rain streaked the windows of Victoria's car as she drove herself to the private terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. She had dressed carefully, simple black slacks, a cream-colored blouse, comfortable shoes, no designer labels showing. No expensive jewelry except for her grandmother's bracelet. No makeup, no styled hair, just a middle-aged black woman who could be anyone. She parked in the regular lot, not the executive spaces. She walked into the terminal, carrying a small bag, looking around like any nervous first-time charter passenger might. No one recognized her. The staff at the front desk glanced at her briefly and looked away. One security guard asked to see her ID twice, even after she showed it the first time. "Just being thorough, ma'am," he said without apology or warmth. Victoria said nothing. She noted his name on his badge, Officer Bradley, and walked to the boarding area. The aircraft was a Gulfstream G650, one of the finest in the Skyward fleet. Victoria knew this plane intimately. She had personally approved its purchase 2 years ago for $12 million. She had chosen the interior design, the seat configuration, and the color of the carpet. Every inch of this aircraft existed because of her decisions. Senator Harold Whitfield was already there with 3 members of his staff. They were laughing about something, looking relaxed and important. The senator was a heavyset white man in his 60s with silver hair and a loud voice. He represented a southern state and had a reputation for being difficult to work with. The senator glanced at Victoria as she approached the boarding area. His eyebrows went up slightly and he looked her up and down with obvious confusion. "Are you with the catering staff?" he asked. Victoria felt a flash of heat in her face. "No, I'm a passenger." "Oh." The senator shrugged and turned back to his conversation, clearly uninterested in anything else she might have to say. One of his aides, a young white man with slicked-back hair, leaned over and whispered something. They both laughed. Victoria could not hear the words, but she could guess. She kept her face calm and walked toward the aircraft. A young flight attendant approached her at the bottom of the stairs. She had kind eyes, a warm smile, and nervous energy in her movements. Her name tag read Hannah. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome aboard. Can I help you find your seat?" "Thank you, Hannah," Victoria said, surprised by the genuine warmth. "I believe I'm in the forward cabin." Hannah nodded and gestured toward the plane. "Right this way. The forward cabin has the best views. Can I take your bag? I'll keep it with me, but thank you." As Victoria climbed the stairs and entered the aircraft, she felt the familiar mix of pride and sadness. This was her plane. She had built this. And yet here she was, being treated like she did not belong. The forward cabin was beautiful, cream leather seats that cost more than most cars, polished wood trim imported from Italy, soft lighting that adjusted automatically. Two of the senator's aides were already seated there, their laptops open, looking very comfortable. Victoria chose a seat near the window. She settled in and looked out at the grey morning sky. Rain was still falling, streaking the window in long silver lines. Hannah brought her a glass of water and a warm towel. "Is there anything else I can get you before takeoff, ma'am?" "No, thank you." "You're very kind." Hannah smiled, but there was something in her eyes. "Something worried me. If you need anything at all, please let me know. I'm here to help." After Hannah left, Victoria noticed another crew member watching from the galley. An older white woman with a pinched expression and cold eyes. She was staring at Victoria like she was a problem to be solved. Victoria looked away and touched her grandmother's bracelet. Then she heard footsteps coming from the cockpit. Heavy, confident footsteps. Captain Raymond Cross emerged into the cabin. He was a tall white man, maybe 60 years old, with steel-grey hair cut short in a military style. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines. He walked like he owned the world and expected everyone else to get out of his way. His eyes swept over the cabin. They passed over the senator's aides without interest, lingering for just a moment on the expensive watches on their wrists and the quality of their suits. Then his eyes landed on Victoria. He stopped walking. For a long moment, he just stared at her. His expression shifted from confusion to something else, something darker. Victoria stared back, keeping her face neutral. "Excuse me," Captain Cross said, his voice cold. "May I help you?" "I'm a passenger," Victoria said calmly. "A passenger." He said the word like it tasted bad. "On this flight?" "Yes." Captain Cross walked slowly toward her seat. He moved into her space, standing too close, looking down at her like she was something unpleasant he had discovered on the bottom of his shoe. "This seat is in the forward cabin," he said. "Yes. That's where I'm sitting. The forward cabin is reserved for premium passengers, VIP clients, people who," he paused, letting the silence say what his words did not, "belong here. Are you with Senator Whitfield's party?" "No. I'm traveling independently." "Independently?" Captain Cross's lips curled into something that was almost a smile, but without any warmth. "I see. Well, I'm afraid there's been some kind of mistake. This section isn't really appropriate for you." Victoria felt her pulse quicken. "Appropriate? We have other seating available in the back of the aircraft. You'd be more comfortable there." He lowered his voice slightly. "Trust me. Everyone would be more comfortable." "I'm quite comfortable here, thank you." The senator's aides had stopped typing. They were watching now, their faces showing the uncomfortable expressions of people who knew something wrong was happening but did not want to get involved. Hannah, the flight attendant, stood frozen in the galley, her face pale with shock. The older crew member was watching with what looked almost like satisfaction. Captain Cross leaned closer to Victoria, close enough that she could smell his aftershave. Close enough that his intimidation was impossible to ignore. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "Let me be clear with you. I've been flying VIP charters for 20 years. I know what kind of clients belong in this section, and I know what kind don't. Now I'm asking you nicely, out of professional courtesy, move to the back." Victoria met his eyes without flinching. And if I don't, that was when he said it. Know your place. The words hung in the air like poison, like a curse, like every hateful word Victoria had ever heard in her life, compressed into 3 syllables. Her hand went to her grandmother's bracelet. She felt the cool metal against her skin, the smooth surface of the heart-shaped charm. She remembered her grandmother's voice, weak but determined, not what they tell you that you are, who you are. Victoria took a slow breath. Would you believe that in that moment, she almost revealed herself, almost pulled out her phone and showed him who he was really talking to, almost ended this whole thing with one sentence, but something held her back. She wanted to see more. She wanted to understand how deep this went. She wanted to know if anyone on this plane would stand up for her when they thought she was nobody. I'll stay here, Victoria said quietly, her voice steady. If you have a problem with that, you can call your supervisor. Captain Cross's face turned red. A vein pulsed visibly in his temple. For a moment, Victoria genuinely thought he might physically remove her from the seat. His hands were clenched at his sides, the knuckles white. We'll see about this, he said through gritted teeth. He turned and marched back to the cockpit, his footsteps heavy with rage. Hannah rushed over to Victoria's seat, her eyes wide with distress. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. That was completely unacceptable. Are you okay? It's not your fault, Victoria said. Captain Cross is. He's always. Hannah stopped herself. She looked around nervously, checking to see who might be listening. I shouldn't say anything. I need this job. I have student loans and my mother is sick and I can't afford to. It's okay, Victoria said gently. She touched Hannah's hand. I understand, really. But inside, Victoria was burning. This was her company, her plane. And her employees were so afraid of retaliation that they could not speak up even when they witnessed blatant racism. What kind of leader had she become that this could happen under her watch? The co-pilot emerged from the cockpit. He was a younger man, maybe 35, with brown skin and worried eyes. His name tag said Officer Daniel Reyes. Daniel approached Victoria's seat slowly, like someone walking toward a bomb. He looked terrified. He kept glancing back at the cockpit door. Ma'am, he said quietly, so quietly she could barely hear him, Captain Cross has asked me to inform you that if you don't move voluntarily, he'll delay the flight until airport security removes you from the aircraft. Victoria looked at Daniel. She saw shame burning in his face. This man did not agree with what was happening, that was obvious, but he was too scared to say so openly. What do you think I should do, Officer Reyes? Victoria asked. Daniel's eyes widened. The question clearly caught him off guard. No one had asked for his opinion. He glanced back at the cockpit again, then at Victoria. His voice dropped even lower. I think, he started. He stopped, swallowed. His hands were trembling slightly. I think you should stay exactly where you are, ma'am. You have every right to be here. Don't let him bully you. Then, before Captain Cross could emerge and see him talking to her, Daniel turned and walked quickly back to the cockpit. Victoria sat back in her seat. It was a small thing, a few whispered words of support, but it meant something. In a world that was telling her she did not belong, one person had chosen to stand with her. She wondered how many other people at her company felt the same way, how many were too scared to speak, how many had given up and left, how many had filed complaints that disappeared into Marcus Webb's office and were never seen again. The older flight attendant, the one with the cold eyes, walked past Victoria's seat. She did not stop, did not offer any assistance. But Victoria heard her mutter something under her breath. Should have just moved, making trouble for everyone. Victoria noted the woman's name tag, Patricia. Two types of people in the world, she thought. Those who stand with the powerless and those who stand with power. And sometimes you do not know which kind someone is until they are tested. The next 30 minutes felt like hours. Senator Whitfield stormed up to Victoria's seat, his face red with irritation. What exactly is going on here? The pilot says we are delayed because of a passenger issue. He jabbed his finger toward Victoria. Are you the problem? With respect, Senator, I'm not the problem. I'm simply sitting in my assigned seat. Well, maybe you should just move to avoid all this trouble. Is it really worth causing a scene? He spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. Think of all the people you're inconveniencing. Victoria almost laughed, making a scene, causing trouble. That was what they always said. Do not make waves, do not cause problems, just accept the injustice quietly and let everyone else go about their day. Yes, Senator, Victoria said, meeting his eyes steadily. It really is worth it. The senator huffed and walked away, muttering something to his aide. The aide nodded and pulled out his phone, starting to record video. Victoria noted this. Evidence was important. Captain Cross made an announcement over the aircraft's intercom. His voice was clipped and professional, betraying none of the anger Victoria had seen in his face. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a brief delay due to a passenger compliance issue. Airport security has been contacted. We should be airborne shortly. I apologize for any inconvenience. Passenger compliance issue, that was the language they used. Clinical, professional, as if Victoria were a malfunctioning piece of equipment rather than a human being. 2 airport security officers boarded the plane a few minutes later. They were both white men, one younger with nervous energy, one older with a tired expression that suggested he had seen too many of these situations. They approached Victoria with careful, measured steps. Ma'am, we've received a complaint from the flight crew about a disturbance. Can you tell us what's happening? I'm refusing to move from my assigned seat, Victoria said clearly, loudly enough for everyone in the cabin to hear, because the captain has decided I don't belong in first class based on the color of my skin. I have a valid ticket, I have done nothing wrong, and I will not be moved. The officers exchanged looks. The older one pulled out a radio and spoke quietly into it. Captain Cross appeared again, striding out of the cockpit with renewed confidence. He clearly expected the officers to solve his problem for him. Officers, thank you for coming. This woman is disrupting my flight. I need her removed immediately so we can depart. Sir, the older officer said slowly, choosing his words with care, she has a valid ticket for this seat. We can't remove a passenger just because. I don't care about her ticket, Captain Cross exploded. His professional mask slipped completely, revealing the rage beneath. I'm the captain of this aircraft. My word is law on this plane. I decide who flies and who doesn't. Sir, I understand your position, but we need to follow certain procedures. If there's no actual security threat, the threat is her. Captain Cross pointed at Victoria, his finger shaking with anger. She doesn't belong here. She's not the type of person who should be in first class. Look at her. Everyone in this cabin knows what I mean. Just look at her. The cabin went completely silent. Everyone was looking now. Senator Whitfield and his aides, Hannah with tears in her eyes, Patricia with her arms crossed. The security officers with expressions of dawning understanding, even Daniel, who had emerged from the cockpit and stood frozen in the doorway. Captain Cross was breathing hard. Red blotches had appeared on his neck and cheeks. He seemed to realize too late that he had said too much, that he had revealed exactly what this was really about. Victoria stood up slowly. She smoothed her blouse. She touched her grandmother's bracelet one final time. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Janet, this is Victoria. I need you to connect me immediately to the head of airport operations at Hartsfield-Jackson. Tell them the owner of Skyward Aviation is on the ground and requires immediate assistance with an employee matter. She watched Captain Cross's face as the words sank in. I watched the color drain away, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Owner, he said, what are you talking about? What is this? Victoria ended the call. She stepped closer to Captain Cross, close enough that only he could hear her next words. My name is Victoria Chambers. I founded Skyward Aviation 23 years ago. I own 47 aircraft, including this one. I own the company that employs you. I sign the checks that pay your salary. She paused, letting each word land like a hammer blow. And you just told me to know my place. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it, no mercy. Here's something you should know about my place, Captain Cross. My place is wherever I decide it is. I built this company from nothing while you were collecting paychecks and treating people like dirt. And your place, as of this moment, is unemployed. Captain Cross staggered backward as if she had physically struck him. His mouth opened and closed uselessly. That's not possible, he stammered. You can't be. I would have been told if the owner was on board. You weren't told because I wanted to see the truth, and now I have. Victoria raised her voice so everyone in the cabin could hear clearly. Captain Raymond Cross, you are terminated from Skyward Aviation, effective immediately. You will surrender your credentials and company property to security and leave this aircraft. You are no longer authorized to operate any Skyward aircraft now or ever. You can't do this, Captain Cross shouted. I have rights. I've worked here for 15 years. I'll sue. You can try. Victoria's voice was ice. But I have a cabin full of witnesses who just heard you say a black woman doesn't belong in first class because of how she looks. I have a video being recorded by the senator's aide. I have 15 years of discrimination complaints that someone in my company has been burying. So please sue me. I would welcome the opportunity to show a jury exactly who you are. She turned to the security officers. Gentlemen, please escort the former Captain Cross off my airplane. The officers moved forward. Captain Cross seemed to deflate completely, all his arrogance draining away in seconds. He suddenly looked old, small, pathetic. As they led him past Victoria, he stopped. His eyes met hers. Who do you think you are? He whispered. It was not a challenge anymore. It was a genuine question from a man whose entire world had just collapsed. Victoria looked at him with something that was almost pity. I'm the woman who built everything you just threw away with your hatred, she said, and I know exactly who I am, do you? They led him off the plane. Victoria watched him go, feeling no triumph, only a deep, tired sadness. This man had spent 15 years flying her planes, representing her company, interacting with her customers. And all that time, he had been poisoning everything he touched. But the real question was, who had let him get away with it for so long? After Captain Cross was removed, the cabin remained silent for a long moment. People seemed uncertain how to react. The world had flipped upside down in the space of 10 minutes. Victoria sat back down in her seat. Her hands were shaking slightly, though she kept her face composed. The adrenaline was still pumping through her veins. Daniel Reyes approached her slowly. His expression was a mixture of awe and relief. Miss Chambers, I'm Officer Reyes. I'm so sorry about what happened. I had no idea who you were. If you had known, what would you have done differently? Victoria asked. Daniel hesitated. I don't know. I hope I would have spoken up sooner, more loudly. You told me to stay, that mattered. Victoria paused. Why didn't you say more? Daniel's face tightened with shame. I was afraid. Captain Cross had connections. He was friends with Mr. Webb. Anyone who challenged him ended up reassigned to bad routes or pushed out entirely. I have a family, kids in school, I couldn't risk. I understand, Victoria said, and she did. Fear was a powerful thing. It made cowards of good people, but understanding is not the same as accepting, she added. This company needs people who will speak up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Are you willing to be that person? Daniel met her eyes. Something shifted in his expression, a decision being made. Yes, ma'am, I am. Good, we'll talk more after we land. Hannah came over next, tears streaming down her face. Miss Chambers, I can't believe. I wanted to say something so many times. Captain Cross treated so many people so badly, not just passengers, the crew too, especially anyone who didn't look like him. Why didn't you report it? Hannah's tears fell harder. We did, some of us did. Nothing ever happened. The complaints just disappeared. We thought no one cared. We thought it was just how things worked here. Victoria felt those words like a knife in her chest. No one cared. Her employees believed that she, their leader, the person who was supposed to protect them, did not care about their suffering. I care, Victoria said firmly. I care very much. And I'm going to find out why those complaints never reached me. She already knew the answer. Marcus Webb, her trusted COO, her friend of 8 years, the man who had smiled at her 2 days ago and assured her that everything was fine. The thought filled her with a cold, heavy rage. Patricia, the older flight attendant with the cold eyes, was standing near the galley, watching everything with a sour expression. She had not approached Victoria. She had not apologized. Victoria called out to her, Patricia, Come here, please. Patricia walked over slowly, her chin held high. Yes, Miss Chambers, I heard what you said earlier about how I should have just moved. About how I was making trouble. Patricia's face paled slightly, but she held her ground. I was just trying to keep the peace, avoid a scene, that's my job. Your job is to serve passengers with respect and dignity, all passengers. Not to side with someone who is humiliating another person based on their race. Victoria paused. How long have you worked for Skyward? 12 years. And in those 12 years, how many times have you seen Captain Cross treat people this way? Patricia was silent. How many times, Patricia? I don't remember exactly. But you've seen it before, you knew what kind of person he was, and you never said anything, never filed a report. Never stood up for the people he was hurting. Patricia's face was tight with resentment. It wasn't my business, I just do my job. Your job is part of this company, and this company does not tolerate what Captain Cross was doing. Your silence made you complicit. Victoria shook her head. You're not fired, not today, but you're going to receive mandatory training on our values and expectations. And if I ever hear of you dismissing or diminishing another person's experience of discrimination, you will be terminated. Do you understand? Patricia nodded stiffly. Yes, Miss Chambers. Good. You may return to your duties. As Patricia walked away, Victoria saw Hannah watching with an expression of amazed gratitude. For so long, people like Captain Cross and Patricia had held all the power. Now, finally, someone was holding them accountable. Senator Whitfield approached, looking deeply uncomfortable. His earlier arrogance had evaporated entirely. Miss Chambers, I owe you an apology. When you came on board, I asked if you were with the catering staff, and that was. It was revealing, Senator, very revealing. The senator flushed red. I didn't mean anything by it. I just didn't expect. You didn't expect that a black woman in simple clothes could be a billionaire. I understand. It's a common assumption. Victoria tilted her head. The question is, what would you have done if I really had been with the catering staff? Would Captain Cross's behavior have been acceptable then? The senator opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. How we treat people shouldn't depend on who they turn out to be, Victoria said. It should depend on who we are. Think about that, Senator. She turned away, leaving him to stand there with his uncomfortable thoughts. The flight to Miami was eventually rescheduled with a new captain, a woman named Captain Evelyn Torres, who had been called in on short notice. She was calm, professional, and apologized sincerely for the delay. Victoria spent most of the flight making phone calls and taking notes. By the time they landed, she had a clear plan of action. But first, she had to deal with Marcus Webb. She returned to Atlanta that evening, going straight from the airport to her office. It was nearly midnight, but the building was not empty. Janet was waiting for her, along with 2 members of the legal team Victoria had called during the flight. Janet, I need everything. Every complaint Marcus Webb has ever reviewed. Every email between him and HR. Every personnel decision he's made in the past 5 years. Everything, Miss Chambers, that's going to take. I don't care how long it takes. Start now. They worked through the night. By dawn, Victoria had found what she feared, and it was even worse than she had imagined. It was not just Captain Cross. There were patterns across the entire company. 19 different complaints about discrimination had been filed in the past 3 years. All 19 had been reviewed by Marcus Webb. All 19 had been closed without action, using almost identical language. Investigated, no action required, resolved through reassignment. The victims were always moved. Given worse routes, worse schedules, worse assignments, some had quit entirely. The accused were never punished. Many had been promoted. Victoria found emails between Marcus and department heads that made her stomach turn. The messages were carefully worded. Marcus was too smart to put anything explicitly damaging in writing, but the implications were clear. Let's manage this quietly. We can't afford the bad publicity. Find a way to make this go away. Reassign her. He's too valuable to lose. Her COO, her trusted friend, had been systematically protecting racists and driving out their victims, all in the name of avoiding bad publicity, all in the name of keeping the peace. all in the name of making her company run smoothly while poisoning it from within. Victoria sat at her desk as the sun rose over Atlanta. She felt exhausted, betrayed, and deeply, overwhelmingly sad. She had trusted Marcus for 8 years. She had promoted him. She had defended him to the board when others questioned his decisions. She had invited him to her home for dinner. She had considered him a friend. And the whole time, he had been lying to her face while people suffered under her company's name. Her phone rang. It was Marcus. "Victoria, I just heard about what happened in Miami. Are you all right?" "I can't believe Captain Cross would." "Stop." Victoria's voice cut through his concern like a blade. "Don't lie to me anymore, Marcus. I know about the complaints. I know you buried them. I know everything." Silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. "Victoria, I can explain. It's more complicated than you think. There were reasons. Come to my office. Now. Victoria, please, can we just... Now, Marcus. And bring your badge." She hung up before he could say another word. Waiting for Marcus to arrive, Victoria walked to the window and looked out at the city. The same view she had looked at 1,000 times before, but now it looked different. Darker, more complicated. She thought about her daughter. She had missed Naomi's art show again. Another broken promise. Another failure as a mother. She touched the empty spot on her wrist where she usually felt her grandmother's bracelet. The bracelet was still there, of course, but for a moment she had forgotten. She had been so consumed by the crisis at work that she had forgotten everything else. What would Grandma say if she could see me now? She would say, "Clean your own house before you try to change the world." Victoria had been so focused on building a successful company that she had stopped looking at what the company was becoming. She had trusted the wrong people. She had delegated too much. She had let injustice grow in the shadows because she was too busy celebrating in the light. There was a knock on the door. Marcus entered. He looked like he had not slept. His usually perfect suit was wrinkled. His eyes were red. "Sit down," Victoria said. Marcus sat. "Explain everything and do not lie to me again." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He stared at his hands clasped in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. "Defeated. When I first started managing complaints, I thought I was protecting the company. We were growing so fast, Victoria. Every lawsuit, every scandal, every negative news story, it could have derailed everything. I saw what happened to other companies when discrimination stories went public. Stock prices crashed, clients fled, years of work were destroyed overnight. So you covered it up. I managed it. I found solutions that kept everyone working. Reassignments, quiet settlements, problems solved, nobody hurt." "Nobody hurt?" Victoria's voice rose. "Do you have any idea what you did to those people?" Grace Thompson was a rising star in this company. Now she loads cargo at 3 in the morning. Daniel Reyes has spent years being too afraid to speak up because he knew what would happen. 19 people, Marcus. 19 people trusted this company to protect them, and you threw them away to avoid bad publicity. Marcus winced. "I didn't see it that way, not at first. I told myself I was being practical, that a few uncomfortable reassignments were better than the alternative. And then it became a pattern, and once it was a pattern, it was too big to admit. If I told you the truth, I would have had to confess that I'd been covering things up for years. I would have lost everything, my job, my reputation, everything I'd built. So you let people suffer to protect yourself. I let people suffer to protect the company." Marcus finally looked up. His eyes were wet. "And yes, to protect myself, I'm not proud of it. I haven't been proud of myself for a long time." Victoria stared at him. 8 years, 8 years of trust, shattered in one conversation. She had believed in this man. She had defended him. She had considered him one of the few people in the world she could rely on. And the whole time, he had been betraying everything she stood for. Who else knew? A few people in HR. They followed my lead. They thought they were following company policy. They didn't know they were covering up discrimination. Not really. I made sure the language was always vague enough to give everyone plausible deniability. Victoria felt the betrayal cut even deeper. It was not just Marcus. It was a system, a culture of silence that had infected her company like a cancer. "You're fired," Victoria said. The words came out calm, even though her heart was breaking. Effective immediately. You will receive whatever severance you're legally entitled to under your contract and nothing more. And I will be speaking to everyone in HR who was involved in this cover-up. Marcus nodded slowly. He did not argue. He did not plead. Maybe he was relieved that it was finally over, that he no longer had to carry the weight of his lies. He stood up and placed his badge on Victoria's desk. For what it's worth, he said, I really did believe I was doing the right thing in the beginning, before it all got away from me. That's the saddest part, Marcus. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. You probably did. And that's exactly how good people become part of terrible systems. Marcus nodded once more. Then he walked out of her office, closing the door quietly behind him. Victoria sat alone as the morning sun filled the room with light. She had cleaned the house, but the house was still damaged, and she had a lot of work to do to repair it. Over the next few weeks, Victoria threw herself into restructuring Skyward Aviation from the ground up. She hired an independent firm to review every discrimination complaint from the past 5 years, every single one. She wanted to know how deep the rot went. She personally met with every employee who had filed a complaint and been silenced. She listened to their stories. She apologized. Grace Thompson was one of the first. They met in Victoria's office on a Tuesday afternoon. Grace was nervous at first, understandably so. The last time she had trusted someone in leadership, it had cost her everything. I'm sorry, Victoria said. I'm sorry this happened to you in my company. I'm sorry no one listened. I'm sorry you were punished for speaking up. Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I almost quit. 12 times, I almost quit. I thought, if the owner doesn't care, why should I stay? Why should I keep fighting for a company that won't fight for me? You would have been right to leave. The fact that you stayed says more about your character than anything else. I stayed because I love flying. I love this industry. I didn't want to let people like Captain Cross drive me out of something I love. Grace paused, but I was starting to give up. If this hadn't happened when it did, I probably would have been gone by the end of the year. Victoria nodded. I want to offer you something, a new position, head of our new internal reporting system. I want to build a way for employees to report problems directly without going through managers who might bury them. And I want you to lead it. Grace's eyes widened. Me, but I'm just a flight attendant. You're someone who spoke up when it cost you everything. You're someone who kept fighting even when the system was against you. That's exactly the kind of person I need. Grace was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled, the first genuine smile Victoria had seen from her. I'll do it, she said. I'll make sure no one else goes through what I went through. Victoria promoted Daniel Reyes to captain. She personally handed him his new stripes at a small ceremony in the company hangar. You had the courage to do the right thing when it was hard, she told him. That's what leadership is, not rank, not authority, courage. Daniel's eyes were wet as he accepted the stripes. I was so scared that day, on the plane. I kept thinking about my family, my kids, what would happen if I lost my job. But you spoke up anyway. I couldn't not speak up. When I saw what was happening to you, I knew it was wrong. And I knew if I stayed silent, I was part of the problem. He paused. My daughter asked me about it later. She heard the story. She asked if I was the one who helped you. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. I was scared, but I tried to do the right thing anyway. Daniel smiled. She said she was proud of me. That meant more than any promotion. Hannah was promoted to head of passenger experience. She threw herself into the role with passion, developing new training programs focused on dignity and respect for every passenger regardless of their appearance. I want our flights to feel safe, she told Victoria. Not just physically safe, emotionally safe. I want people to know that when they board a Skyward plane, they'll be treated like human beings. That's exactly what I want too, Victoria said. 3 weeks after the incident, Victoria finally kept her promise to Naomi. She arrived at her daughter's school early, before anyone else. She walked through the art gallery, looking at the student work displayed on the walls. Naomi's paintings were in the corner, new pieces that Victoria had never seen before. The paintings were powerful, bold colors, striking compositions. Portraits of women of different ages and backgrounds, each one facing some kind of storm but standing firm. "You came." Victoria turned. Naomi was standing there, looking uncertain, hopeful, guarded. "I came," Victoria said. "I'm here, you've said that before. I know, and I've failed before, but I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to be better." Victoria walked toward her daughter. Something happened at work. Something that made me realize I've been so focused on building a company that I forgot to build a life. I forgot to be present for the person who matters most. Naomi's expression softened slightly. "What happened?" Victoria told her the story, all of it. The flight, Captain Cross, the discrimination, Marcus's betrayal, everything. Naomi listened without interrupting. When Victoria finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That's awful," she finally said, "that you went through that, that all those people went through that. It was awful, but it also woke me up. It made me realize that I can't just assume everything is fine. I have to pay attention. I have to be present, at work and at home." Victoria took her daughter's hands. "I've been so absent, Naomi, so distant, and I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Naomi's eyes glistened with tears. "I just wanted you to show up, Mom, that's all. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just my mom. I'm here now, just your mom. I promise to do better. Don't promise, just do it." Victoria smiled through her own tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from Grandma through you." Victoria touched her grandmother's bracelet. She unclasped it from her wrist and held it out to Naomi. "I want you to have this. Grandma gave it to me when I was about your age. She told me to remember who I am, not what other people tell me I am, who I really am." Naomi took the bracelet carefully, like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Are you sure, Mom?" "I'm sure. It's time for it to be yours. Carry it forward. Remember who you are, baby, always." Naomi put the bracelet on. It fit perfectly. They stood there in the gallery, surrounded by Naomi's art, mother and daughter finally reconnecting after years of distance. "Your paintings are incredible," Victoria said. "You have so much talent." "I want to tell stories with my art," Naomi said. "Stories about people who don't get seen, people who get overlooked and underestimated. Like the women in these paintings, like me on that plane, like you everywhere, Mom, your whole life. You built everything while people were telling you that you couldn't, that you didn't belong." Naomi squeezed her mother's hand. "That's the story I want to tell." 6 months later, Skyward Aviation announced comprehensive new policies on diversity, equity, and inclusion. They became one of the first private aviation companies to implement mandatory bias training for all employees, transparent complaint tracking, and independent review of all disciplinary decisions. Victoria spoke at an industry conference about what had happened. She did not hide the story. She told everyone about Captain Cross, about Marcus Webb, about the 19 complaints that had been buried. "I built a company," she said from the stage, "but I stopped paying attention to the culture inside it. I trusted the wrong people. I delegated my responsibility to leaders who didn't share my values. I let injustice grow in the shadows while I celebrated our success in the light." She paused, looking out at the audience of executives and industry leaders. "The lesson is simple but hard. Success means nothing if it comes at the cost of human dignity, and leaders are responsible for what happens under their watch, whether they knew about it or not. The moment you stop looking, the problems start growing. The moment you stop listening, the voices get silenced, and by the time you realize what's happened, you've become part of the very system you thought you were fighting against." After the speech, a young black woman approached Victoria. She was maybe 25, dressed in a pilot's uniform, her face bright with excitement and nerves. "Miss Chambers, my name is Officer Patricia Lewis. I just graduated from flight school. I wanted to thank you. Thank me for what? For speaking up, for firing Captain Cross, for changing things." Patricia's voice trembled slightly. "When I heard what happened, I thought maybe there's hope. Maybe the industry is changing. Maybe someone like me really can belong in the cockpit, not despite who I am, but because of who I am." Victoria smiled. "You absolutely belong, Officer Lewis. And don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." She She touched the place on her wrist where her grandmother's bracelet used to be. She thought about Naomi wearing it now. She thought about the legacy she was passing on. Not a legacy of money or planes or buildings. A legacy of knowing your place and making sure that place was wherever you had the courage to stand. 1 year after the incident, Victoria received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, on plain stationery, with no return address. She opened it carefully. "Miss Chambers, you probably don't remember my name. I'm Thomas Cross, Raymond Cross's son. I want to apologize for what my father did to you. I want you to know that when I heard the full story, I was ashamed, not just of him, of myself. I knew my father had problems. He said things at home that made me uncomfortable. He made jokes that weren't really jokes. But I never confronted him. I told myself it wasn't that bad. I made excuses because confronting the truth was too hard. After you fired him, my father was angry. He blamed everyone but himself. He called you names I won't repeat. He talked about lawyers and lawsuits and revenge. But over time, something changed. I don't know exactly when or why. Maybe it was losing his career. Maybe it was the public shame. Maybe it was just finally hitting rock bottom. He started therapy. He started reading books about race and privilege and history. He started asking questions he had never asked before. Hard questions, uncomfortable questions. He's not a different person yet. Maybe he never will be completely. 60 years of habits don't disappear overnight, but he's trying. He's genuinely trying. And I think that started because someone finally held him accountable. Someone finally told him that what he was doing was wrong and that there would be consequences. I don't expect you to forgive him. I don't even expect you to respond to this letter. I just wanted you to know that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences can lead to change, even in people you've given up on. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. Thank you for not letting him get away with it. Sincerely, Thomas Cross. Victoria read the letter 3 times. She was not sure how to feel about it. Forgiveness was not something she could offer easily. The wound was still too fresh, the anger still too real. But change, the possibility of change, that was something, that was worth something. She put the letter in her desk drawer next to a photograph of her grandmother. Maybe, she thought, that was what legacy really meant, not the things you build, not the money you accumulate, not the power you wield, but the ripples you send out into the world, the moments when someone else chooses differently because of what you did, the chains that get broken because you refuse to accept them. She looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline, her city, her company. She had learned something important on that flight to Miami. She had learned that power means nothing if you do not use it to protect the powerless, that success means nothing if you are blind to the failures happening in your name. And she had learned something else too, something her grandmother had tried to teach her all those years ago. Knowing your place is not about accepting the place other people put you in. It is about knowing who you are deep down and standing in that truth, no matter who tells you otherwise, no matter who tries to push you down, no matter who tells you to move to the back. Your place is wherever you have the courage to stand. Victoria touched the empty spot on her wrist and smiled. She knew exactly who she was. If this story made you think about your own moments, times when you had to stand up for yourself, or times when you wished you had, I would love to hear your thoughts. We all carry those moments with us. The question is what we do with them going forward. Victoria's story ended with change, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. One person's courage created ripples that touched lives she would never even know about. That is the best kind of ending, is it not? When standing up for yourself becomes standing up for everyone who comes after you. Thank you for listening to this story. Remember who you are, not what they tell you, who you really are, and never let anyone tell you to know your place. Your place is wherever you decide it should be. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.